Okay, decolonizing representation. So I have also asked you to look at a blog post in Oxfam website, which talks about how can we represent people differently, because a lot about international development is about communicating. When you ask for donors or international supporters to support a certain causes, you have to represent those people that you claim that you are helping. So I have taken up two posters here. So the first one here, 750 million women and girls alive today were married before their 18th birthday. Help us end violence. So maybe you can take a moment and think about these representations of women and girls worldwide. What kind of things that it tells, what kind of things that it hides, what kinds of value judgment that's underlying it. And then also this one, he's starving, we are not. It's time to share, right? So what kind of image of the kid that this poster by UNICEF is trying to project, and what kind of impressions that it will leave to people who see this. These representations has actual impact not only on people who see this advertisement, but also people who are represented by it. So when you talk about decolonizing representations, we are talking about being more mindful about who is telling the story. So who is telling this early childhood marriage and who is telling this starving story? How are they telling the story? Is it one sentence that looks very appealing, one picture that looks very appealing, and then what can be counted as knowledge? About the people's own perspective. What if they don't have a clear conception as who is child and who is adult, because they are encouraged to take up responsibility at an earlier age to support the community, right? So what can be counted as knowledge? And also deconstructing our own knowledge, deconstructing our own worldview, and in the process decolonizing ourselves, because words make world. It is not just words. When you read enough of these words, which represent either other people or yourself, you came to believe in this rhetoric. And remember, I was talking about institutional barriers. And apart from who set the schedule and who determines the participant, which we already talked about in terms of decolonizing methodology, but who controls the products, right? Who gets the funding, right? This is also important. Who controls what we write when we write up our research, when we write up our reports, what kind of languages we are using, what kind of intention we want these reports to produce. For many development agencies that actually want these reports to even encourage more donors to donate. So the typical strategy, because I work in UNESCO, the typical strategy is there are two. Number one is you talk about success stories, how people's lives are being transformed by your single project, or people talk about how much plight or how much problems people are facing in a situation, and how helpless they are, and how much they need your support. So these are the two different kinds of strategy being used to attract fundings. So when the development agencies control the information about these people, this is sort of a kind of colonization. So in the blog post that I have directed you to, they have included many sources of different ways of representing. For example, this one, Agam Agam, Doubt Foreboding. This is like a book that is produced by people in the Philippines, telling their feelings about climate change without using jargon, but using poems and other kind of expression methods. So it is multi-vocal in the sense of it invited many people who are experiencing that problem to share their perspective with you. So this is one of the example of decolonizing representation, having them representing themselves using the way that they are most comfortable with. And then also, how about decolonizing and deconstructing our own knowledge and our way of knowing? And so the blog post also direct us to this: how do we know the World Series? So for example, one article here is To what extent does the colonial present prevent higher education and serve to reproduce structural hierarchies? Apart from being careful of how we write about other people, it is also about reflecting on how we know about other people by ourselves and then challenging our own system. So now I would like to share just a little bit about my research in Nepal. And so, as you might have already know, I'm in the joint program of cultural anthropology and environment and resources, right? And then the field of cultural anthropology has a colonial history. So in the beginning, it was the colonial master who asked the anthropologists to go and study certain groups of native people so that the anthropologists can come back and tell them more information for them to more easily control or govern these people. So anthropology has a really nasty colonial history, and then fortunately they are aware of that. So there was this crisis of representations in anthropology. People become really sensitive and always debating about how can you represent certain group of people, how to best represent them, with your words, but also incorporating their voices as genuinely as possible. So this is a constant debate. And then this is connected to the reflexivity turn in anthropology. So nowadays, most of the American anthropologists, when they write about some people, they will include a component called reflexivity, meaning what is their position in the community, how have they influenced the people around them, how are those people viewing him or her. So being reflexive of themselves, being only one person in a society that might have limited knowledge about other people, versus in the 1950s and 1960s, people are much more thinking that, oh, that is a scientist coming in and telling all the facts and figures about these people, so they have the ethnographic authority. But nowadays, people are aware that this is not possible because all knowledge is partial and situated knowledges, according to Donna Haraway. And then also there's much more discussion about ethics and relationship with informants. What is okay to do? What is not okay to do? Must we keep everything confidential? Must we give credit to people when it's due? So there are much more discussion about this in cultural anthropology. And also there is an ontological terms in anthropology. Ontological term basically means trying to write knowledge not according to our Western or academic understanding of knowledge, such as categorizing things into familiar categories and analyze as such, but to understand how native people or people we are working with understand the world. So what I did in my fieldwork in Nepal is what I call participant conversation. You can see that this is really something that has been repeated and emphasized time and again, which is dialogue. So dialogue has been emphasized by pedagogy of the oppressed, by grounded knowledge. So this is really about a re-emphasis on dialogue. An adaptation from participant observation. So participant observation is the famous methodology of anthropologists who typically go and live in a community for a long period of time and just become one of them, doing what they do while observing these people, right? So but I also bring in the component of conversations. I will talk to these people not just in terms of asking them, but also in terms of telling them my opinion in a situated manner. So my research is actually trying to study how people understand development and sustainability in semi-rural Kathmandu Valley. And the way I try to do my scholarship responsibly is through these four ways. Number one is when I was there, when I was spending time with them, I directly support their grant proposal writing and fundraising efforts, right? So I have already helped them to apply for several awards, and we won one of them, and that brought in like $3,500, which is sort of a very remarkable amount for them. And also I have conversations with them all the time, bringing in my knowledge to question their practices in a respectful manner. For example, nowadays they are trying to encourage increasing productivity in their agriculture, so they are sort of using more and more hybrid seeds, And because I know about Monsanto and things happening in India and other parts of the world where people are become really reliant on these hybrid seeds and unable to produce their own seed because of cross germination, I discussed this with them and asked them to think about the balancing of using local seeds and hybrid seeds. So as a result, they start to pay attention to what are the vegetables that have really good local varieties and how can we further promote that, even though completely giving up hybrid seeds seems to be impossible for them right now, because of how they just need to maintain their livelihood with the local market prices. So this is how I have conversation with them, bringing in my knowledge from the other places, and then I also focus on how people reclaim development and sustainability rather than criticizing how they were impacted by local, national, and international power structure. So they were definitely impacted by those things, but and I will pay attention to those things, but I will not focus on criticizing those things. I want to more highlight their agency and the ability to navigate all these constraints. So this is how I try to represent them in a more decolonial method. And then I also try to focus on intersectionality to ensure multiple perspectives are covered. So I don't want to just listen to the people who speak very well in English. I also learn Nepali hard and speak to the women, the older women, the younger women, the girl students, women of different castes, and men of different castes. So I try to encounter with different kind of identities, or intersectional identities, to understand their perspective. Go back to the table that we have about decolonizing methodology, where we have these 4 R's: respect, relevance, reciprocity, and responsibility. And I try to look at how well do I do if I use that as a matrix, right? And respect, which involves long-term engagements with people and respecting the schedule. I think most anthropologists can do this really well because we are expected to spend more than 1 year in our field. So we have a lot of time. We are not in a hurry. And we typically study a limited number of people in a smaller community. So I wasn't afraid that I'm not able to talk to them again. I don't have this, I have less productivity anxiety as I would have in the United States. So it is a long-term engagement, so I can be very respectful of them. And then relevance. So my research topic, even though I have discussed with them about my research topic and they are definitely interested in them, but I don't think this is the most relevant thing for them. The more relevant thing to them might be my conversation with them on their strategies, because they always ask me as well, like, what is the opinion if we do this? What is the opinion if we do that? So they value my opinion as a development professionals and as an academics. So I'm able to discuss ideas with them and then write them down and then give suggestions. So in this way, I'm doing things that are relevant to them. And then reciprocity. I directly support their day-to-day work, as I mentioned. Whenever they need me to write something, apply for an award, and think about a strategy, I discuss with them and I directly support this work, and I will share all my research findings with them. Perhaps you can say that responsibility is low, in my case, if you talk about responsibility being having the community controlling my research product, because ultimately this is a PhD dissertations, and I have to fulfill what my committee members want me to do. I have to publish them in a way that is acceptable to the wider community, because I'm just a young junior scholar, so I cannot be too radical in terms of the way I do things. So there is this established protocol in the academics that I'm following. So in that sense, they do not have control on my analysis and my final products, even though I share these analysis and final products with them. So I'm just doing this to show that this can be done. This is not really that difficult. As long as you put in the heart and you truly care about the people that you work with, this can be done. And in the end of this lecture, I want to direct you to a really famous TED Talk by Adichie. It's called The Danger of the Single Stories. I really love this TED Talk. So and it tells a lot about the importance of representations. So please enjoy this TED Talk. So my final question here is, if you are to choose, what is the best position for you to support development, whatever you think it should mean? Researcher, professional, communicator, why?